Hello everybody, I'm Richard Holdner. Welcome to the channel. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff so you get notified when I do all this very cool cam testing. And speaking of cam testing, probably everybody out there in the LS world is familiar with the SLOPY Stage 2 cam, originally produced by Elgin and now knocked off by probably many people. But Elgin was the OG SLOPY Stage 2 cam. But did you guys know that Elgin also makes other camshafts, smaller camshafts? If you've ever watched this channel, you know that I personally think that SLOPY Stage 2, while it does make good power, smaller cams are often better for some of these turbo applications, and I think that SLOPY Stage 2 is just a little bit too big for your typical 4.8 or 5.3 daily driver kind of street deal. But what happens when we run a smaller cam from Elgin? We're going to compare that to the SLOPY Stage 2 and maybe a couple of others. Hey guys, if you're new, welcome to the channel. But what happens if you have a question? Hey, I saw this video, but I wanted to ask Richard a question. Well, you're in luck. You get to do that. Join us nightly, 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on the live feed. You can come on, join the group. If I don't have an answer to your question, chances are there are lots of bright guys. They might have an answer. So if you've got a question about any of the video that you just saw, or maybe you're working on a project, join us live, 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on this channel. Okay guys, we've got our Elgin cam installed, our 5.3. Let's go make some pulls and see how she does. Got our camera stand, whoa. Over into the console. Yeah. To get things started, we ran our first of our small Elgin cams on our 5.3 liter L33. It was my Junkyard motor, all aluminum L33, 799 heads. We had the stock L33 cam. We had long tube headers. We had a Holley management system. This one had the truck intake and throttle body, and also a set of 80-pound injectors because we previously ran this thing with boost. So run with our stock camshaft, and with an optimized tune, we add timing till it stops making power. We adjust the air fuel till it stops making power. So this is how much power it makes. So run with our headers and no accessories. Our L33 with a stock cam produced 364.5 or 365 horsepower, and peak torque checked in at 389 foot-pounds. And here's what happened when we added the first of our two Elgin cams. It is the 218 cam, that's what I'm calling it. As you can see, not surprisingly, a cam upgrade on almost any camshaft on a 5.3 liter, even a Junkyard one. We had also upgraded the springs on this. We put a set of BTR, Branch Racing Beehive springs on this combination because we knew we'd be running lots of camshafts on it, so we wanted to have something other than the stock springs in it. But equipped with this Elgin cam, and I'll go ahead and put the specs up here. Let's take a look at that and see. So the Elgin cam was a 526, 524 lift, so fairly low lift, a 218, 227 at 50 duration, and 112 degree lobe separation angle, so kind of a medium-sized camshaft. And equipped with that Elgin cam, our combination produced 429.7, we'll call that 430 horsepower. Peak torque was up to 411 foot-pounds, and it basically made as much as the stock cam. We loaded this thing down to about 2,800 RPM, and it seemed to make as much as the stock cam all the way down in the low RPM range. And then from about 33 or 3,400 RPM, started gaining power, as we've seen with most of these camshafts. Big gains out on the big end. This thing made peak power at 6,100 RPM, but continued to make power, was above 400 horsepower all the way out past 6,500 RPM. So as we see and have shown time and time again, a mild camshaft upgrade on LS goes a long way, because we went from 365 horsepower to 430 horsepower. Let's check out our next cam. oil pump. Make sure the electric water pump's on. Oil pressure's good. You guys can see here, nice little 435 horsepower, 413 foot-pounds of torque. So sticking a camshaft in an otherwise stock 5.3, this thing has headers on it. It's pretty cool. Now that I'm taking a look at the smaller Elgin camshaft, the 218, we need to take a look at its bigger brother that they sent, which is a 223 cam. Once again, this is our stock camshaft with our 5.3 liter, the L33, making 364.5 horsepower and 387 foot-pounds of torque. 89 foot-pounds of torque. Here's what happened when we put the larger of the two Elgin cams. And I'll go ahead and we'll take a look at the cam specs on the Elgin cam. This one was a 524 lift, both intake and exhaust, 223, 236 at 50, and 110 degree lobe separation angle. And as you can see, we did pick up quite a bit of power. Peak power is up to 437 horsepower, 437.2, up from 365. Peak torque was up from 389 to 413 foot-pounds. It did lose a little bit of power down low. It's hard to tell. I know that these are the same color, but that's the only thing that I can do. The software will not allow me to change the color, even though it would allow me to do that at Westech. The viewing software that I have is just not cooperating. But it did lose a little bit of power down low. And the interesting thing is, let's compare this 223 cam to the 228 Sloppy Stage 2 cam. And we can see there's actually not a lot to be, there's not a big difference in power. The Sloppy Stage 2 did make a little bit more, 439 horsepower, so, 2 horsepower. The Sloppy Stage 2 actually lost a little bit down low compared to this camshaft. And that's actually exactly what we would expect. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the stock so we can see this a little bit better. So what we're seeing here, very minute differences, but it does show that the bigger 228 cam makes more power on the top and makes less power down low. So this, and the interesting thing is if we were to overlay the smaller camshaft, the smaller 218 Elgin camshaft, we would see the same thing. The smaller Elgin camshaft makes less power at the top and more power down low. And then the trade-off, they're kind of making the same in the middle there. So it's an interesting thing. So you guys might also be thinking, well, Richard, what about the other cams that you ran on this L33? Well, we also ran and this will go along with what we're talking about here. The bigger the intake duration number, basically, there are other things that affect this, but what I like to do is the bigger the intake duration number, usually what we have is this kind of scenario. We have more peak power and less bottom end power, and we see that if we add in the truck NORRIS cam, for instance, from Brian Tooley Racing, we have a lot more low speed power. It is a 212 cam, and we have less power out at the top. Exactly what we would expect. Here is, and I know that you're looking at this thinking, well, there's a lot going on here, Richard. It's hard for me to tell. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here. So the truck NORRIS cam is the lowest of the four. Then, as we might expect, the 218 cam, and then the 223 cam, and then the 228 cam. They're doing exactly what we would expect these camshafts to do. And if we zoom in on the low speed side, on the torque side, we see the same thing. The top one is the smallest cam. That's the truck NORRIS cam. The next one is the 218 cam, followed by the 223, and then the lowest one of the bunch is the Sloppy Stage 2 cam. So they're doing exactly what we would expect of camshafts. And we'll throw one more in here because 4 isn't confusing enough. We'll throw in one more. The other one that I had tested on this was the, that would be the hot rod cam. We'll take a look at that, because I know people are going to ask about it. So the hot rod cam, even though this is the one like ringer and all this, the hot rod cam, even though it doesn't have the biggest intake duration, it actually made the most power. I'll go ahead and zoom in on the peak power stuff again. We can see the hot rod cam here is on top, even though it only had 221 degrees of intake duration. So guys over at Brian Tooley throwing me off my game by producing a camshaft that makes more power despite the fact that it has a lower duration number. But if we see down low, it kind of mimics the larger 228 Sloppy Stage 2 cam, but it makes as much power down low as that one does, but makes more power on top. Now you should all be thoroughly confused, but please know, bigger cams, more power on top, smaller cams, more power down low. Let's get to our conclusion. Okay guys, what did we learn in our comparison with the stock cam, the two Elgin cams, and I even threw in a couple of Brian Tooley Racing cams just as comparison because those were known pieces. So what did we find out once again about LS camshafts? So we look at the stock camshaft and we look at the two smaller Elgin camshafts, compare those to the Sloppy Stage 2. We see exactly what we've been saying for years and years, that a smaller cam makes more power down low and makes less power up top. And we saw that in graduated steps, going from the 218 cam to the 223 cam to the 228 Sloppy Stage 2 cam, even though if you take a look at the exact specs, they're obviously different, but it gives you a pretty good idea. That's why I like to use the intake duration as for the sign of the bigness of the camshaft. It usually gives us a fairly good idea, and then we saw that with the 212 Brian Tooley Racing Truck Norris cam. It made a lot more power, maybe more than we would expect given the change in duration, but it just goes to show you, less cam or less duration for a camshaft that you want to make good power down low, more duration for a camshaft that you want power up top, and we saw that with the Sloppy Stage 2, and also the hot rod cam that I showed you in there, that made more power up top. So when you're choosing a cam, choose the cam for like an intake manifold, where you want it to make peak power. Armature holder, make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. More testing and not just LS coming up.